Hello, this is Dr. Dan Kohinka. In this presentation, I'm going to address the relationship between organizational development and change. We are going to discuss a variety of topics, as you can see here, ranging from how organizational development and organizational change are defined and an explanation of these concepts. We will talk about the evidence that may be in an organization that is oftentimes ignored by management, and that evidence could be pointing to challenges associated with resistance to change, and which ultimately leads to a lack of innovation, growth, development. We will talk about very specific factors associated with resistance to change, including internal factors associated with perhaps employees, policy, those things that are internally within an organization, as well as external factors that will impact in a negative way change. In other words, there's external factors that will cause resistance to change. We will then talk about how to eliminate these various forms of resistance to change, including developing a culture that embraces change. And in order for that to occur, we need to understand differences between leadership and management, because so many organizations will be very management heavy. In other words, they have many managers, they have many people that know how to delegate and tell people what to do basically, and make sure that the tasks get done each day. However, also many organizations lack the number of leaders within an organization and the quality of leaders in order to develop a culture that does really embrace change, and in turn becomes what we'll talk about near the end of our presentation, a continuous improvement culture. One way of developing a continuous improvement culture is through a servant leadership culture. Servant leadership characteristics are very appropriate to developing a culture of change and a culture of innovation. So we will address that. And then finally, I'll give a very brief explanation of a change intervention model that can be used to help overcome resistance to change and be applied within an organization, so that way it eventually becomes a culture that embraces change and becomes a continuous improvement culture. So let's begin. First, organizational development we are defining in this presentation as the process of addressing change and creating a culture of continuous improvement. There are many organizations around the world that have embraced this model. In other words, they've embraced the idea that they need to very strategically address change as a challenge within the workplace. And once they are able to overcome that challenge, that in turn leads to a whole variety of benefits, ranging from continuous improvement, quality, happier employees, more engaged employees, a whole number of things that are associated with being able to address the challenges associated with change. And we will talk about those throughout this presentation. Organizational change itself can occur for many different reasons. For example, products and services for one reason or another change. For example, perhaps certain resources are no longer available. So products that an organization offers they're no longer able to offer those particular products. Therefore, they need to change. Services change. For example, as technology has grown and advanced, previously, perhaps even 50 years ago, there was more of a need for people that fixed basic technology, radios, televisions, things of that nature. In the advent of computers, computer systems, how much that has progressed over the years, all of a sudden the services needed to both provide and fix these services has caused significant change, and everything associated with them, both externally to manufacture and develop these products, to the services that are provided to make the products function, to handle problems associated with cell phones, things of that nature, as well as to teach people how to use the various technologies. So products and services will change, and organizations need to adapt to that change in order to stay in business. I've already addressed technology, how that also drives change, and innovation. As organizations innovate, they need to be able to change how they do things. But of course, being able to change also leads to innovation. So there's a direct relationship between how change is embraced within an organization, how it's managed, as well as innovation, and the two will drive each other. Population demands also will promote change. For example, this year, whether it be global population, local population, there are going to be different demands, whether it be for education, medicine, food, clothing, housing, all of those different things that people need, versus next year or the previous year, the demands are likely going to be different, just depending on changing circumstances. Therefore, the population, an external factor, will drive change, and people need to, within organizations, need to be prepared for that. Expansion can also drive change. So expansion itself is change. In other words, when an organization perhaps purchases a competitor, or when an organization's growing, they're having, as I will describe here, success and failure. If they're having success, they're growing, they're expanding, they need to know how to manage that change. It may be that physical buildings and locations need to be changed. It may be that internal processes are changed. If an organization goes, let's say, from it transitions from a family-oriented business where it's only family that work at the establishment to where all of a sudden now external employees are hired, depending on the laws and the rules and regulations ranging from one community or country to the next, it may very well be that additional benefits, insurance, who knows what it might be, based on, again, where you're located at, the company has to change if they transition from, let's say, a family-owned business to a larger business. And then as that grows and becomes perhaps a corporation, now the rules, regulations change again, so therefore they need to change with that. So success, expansion can lead to significant change, as well as failure. Organizations will have good days and bad days. They'll have where they're expanding and doing very well, and then for some reason, perhaps some of the reasons we've already addressed, they do not do so well. Therefore, they need to know how to very quickly change and address the challenges associated with their failures, so then in turn they can be successful again. And finally, turnover. Many companies, especially if they do not have proper succession planning, meaning a plan put together so if someone leaves, they have someone that can replace them. If they do not do that, key assets can leave an organization. Individuals can retire. They perhaps leave to a competitor. Once individuals leave an organization, if they are key assets to that organization, that can really promote change. It may be that the person that founded the organization and has a lot of knowledge on the products and services that are offered, if they leave, if that knowledge leaves, the company may have to very quickly adapt and learn how to manage themselves without that individual or those individuals, and which may in turn lead to innovation, may in turn lead to all changes in products and services or whatever, so there's more change there. You can see how all of these things can be connected together, and if an organization does not properly address change, they will, first off, they will experience change, and if they're not properly prepared to address it, they will experience many significant challenges. Some of the evidence that organizations and the management within the organizations can look for is, for instance, lack of innovation. If an organization has been continuously doing the same thing year in and year out, every single year they're doing the same thing, the same methods, the same processes, everything is the same, that is a good sign of a lack of innovation and an indicator that there are challenges associated with change. In other words, the change is not occurring. It is not being addressed. There's something going on because a company is not innovating and changing. Silence from key employees. I put this example here for a specific reason, and that's because it addresses communication. or lack of communication. If key employees, for some reason, are silent, they're not communicating ideas, they're doing their jobs, and that's it, that may be a sign that there is some communication-related challenges within the workplace. Perhaps a lack of leadership, perhaps management that is not open to discussions about how to innovate and change. Perhaps there's lack of collaboration within the organization, leading to key employees within the organization, the ones that you would expect would be the ones that will provide some ideas on how to innovate and change and improve the organization. If they're silent, that's an indicator of a problem. What talk, not action means is that there are many meetings, perhaps there's many people talking about ideas for change, but there's no action. This is also a problem. Maybe people feel compelled to talk about the problems, but either no one's willing to do the action necessary to make the change. Maybe the culture is not conducive to change. Whatever the reasons are, for some reason, people are continuously talking about change, but they're not doing anything. Again, a very serious problem. Declining performance. If an organization does not improve, it will decline. It cannot stay the same. It'll go one direction or the other. Therefore, if there's declining performance with an organization, as employees are perhaps not engaged in their work, they're not happy, they're not satisfied, that's another indicator that there's problems associated with change. And then finally, resistant employees. When ideas are brought up, when potential solutions to issues going on within the organization are brought up, employees are resistant, they push back, they don't want to change, they like it the way things are. That is a major indicator that it's a culture that's very resistant to change. It may be that many people want to change, have the knowledge, the skills, the abilities, the willingness to change. However, in many cases, there can be only a few individuals that are very resistant, and they may have influence over many people, causing an organization to have problems. And they do not change, they do not innovate. Let's now discuss some additional specific internal factors associated with resistance to change. At times that can be due to bureaucracy. In other words, there's so many policies and rules and regulations within an organization. Administration has perhaps taken over the organization. In other words, if it's a healthcare system, the people that are doing the services, the doctors, the nurses, the janitors, the orderlies, all the individuals that are doing the work are having trouble. They're perhaps the ones that are aware of the problems, but they cannot change because of so many rules and regulations that administration is perhaps enforcing, that there's a disconnect. And due to that bureaucracy, there's just resistance to change coming from the rule makers, and because they have to enforce all these things. That can be a serious issue. If there, and I will address this in great detail after a while, but if there is too much management, or if the management that exists are inadequate leaders, in other words, they are great managers perhaps, but they lack leadership abilities, vision, effective communication, mentorship, those various characteristics associated with a leader. If leadership is lacking, then people can be resistant to change because they are just looking at the rules and the tasks and all of those things, and they do not perhaps understand the bigger issues. Groupthink can be a problem. I addressed this already to some degree, where highly influential people can speak the loudest, they have the most influence, and as a result, everyone agrees, and this leads to resistance because everyone just agrees with those few people, and unfortunately, a few people can oftentimes really have a serious negative impact on an organization. A lack of vision and understanding is also associated with inadequate leadership. Leaders are the ones that provide vision. Leaders are the ones that provide the explanations and the training and the teaching that is needed to properly get employees to understand why change is needed. Fear of the unknown is often caused by a lack of communication as well. When individuals fear the unknown, they do not want change. Especially if things are going well, they will not want to embrace change because things are going well, and they may feel that if change does occur, that things will not be so well. They will not perhaps make as much money, they will not be promoted, they will maybe even lose their jobs. So that fear of the unknown, that insecurity that comes with that, can cause people to be resistant to change. They need to be explained all of the information associated with the change in order for them to properly accept the change. We'll talk about those solutions after a while here. The short-term cost, many times people that are not leaders or more managers will look at the short term. They'll look at the immediate costs and the immediate benefits associated with how they conduct their daily affairs, their tasks that they do every day and every week. They will look at the short-term costs associated with some change and feel that it will be too expensive. They will not reap the rewards. They will not receive the benefits of that cost. And therefore, if there are effective leaders within the organization, they're not going to be necessarily thinking short-term. They'll be thinking more long-term. People get very comfortable in what they're doing. And similar to before, if they may fear the unknown, they may be somewhat insecure that if something new occurs, they will not be able to do their jobs as well. All sorts of reasons, all sorts of psychological reasons associated with being comfortable with a position and not wanting to change. That's why learning new things is a good thing, but also people can be afraid to learn new things. And then finally, past failures. If an organization has had failures in the past with change, people may just say, hey, we did not do well in our last change effort, therefore we're not going to do well again. This can be a difficult challenge to overcome unless an effective approach is taken. That's what we are going to address at the end of this presentation. Now, in addition to those internal factors, there are many external factors that can impact an organization's change efforts. It could be environmental or natural causes. In other words, it could be a pandemic. It could be earthquakes, hurricanes, things of that nature that cause significant damage or harm to an organization that in turn will force an organization to have to change. New government laws and regulations, those can very quickly cause an organization to have to oftentimes very quickly change, because if they do not, then there may be penalties and perhaps they may even be shut down until the change occurs. Economic reasons for change. Here again, if there is some sort of catastrophe, if there's some sort of crisis that causes economic conditions to change, organizations may have to very quickly adapt, whether that means laying off employees and changing the way things are done. It could mean just making a dramatic shift in how services are conducted or how products are developed. Whatever it may be, economic conditions can cause change, particularly in a global economy. It could very well be that what impacted an organization across the world is now impacting your organization, and you need to adapt, you need to change. And that includes, what we're talking about here is competition. It could be that if there's an incredible innovation made by an organization and they all of a sudden are very quickly getting all the business, and even if they are all the way across the world, and if you as an organization do not change, that competition will take your business and it may drive you out of business. And finally, corruption. Unfortunately, corruption exists. It always has existed. It probably always will exist. And when employees, yes, that's a little bit more internal, are corrupt, or there are external individuals that are corrupt that cause problems within your organization. It could be, for instance, government officials that are corrupt, that are making demands of organizations that cause problems. It could be even competition that are causing problems for for the people that they're competing with, that are causing issues, and an organization must adapt and change to address these challenges. So now let's go ahead and shift to, now that we better understand what some of the challenges are associated with change, we will address how to eliminate that resistance to change almost in its entirety. In other words, almost all of the resistance we've talked about, to some degree, we could be able to eliminate. We may not be able to eliminate those unforeseen external factors, but particularly internally, we can learn how to eliminate them. And if anything, maybe we can't eliminate the problem itself, but we can eliminate the fear, the negative outcomes associated with that problem. So first off, how do we do that? Well, we can maximize worker potential. What does that mean? What that means is if workers are properly cross-trained, they are educated and trained to do not just different jobs, but also developed as individuals, what can happen is they can be better equipped for change. Also, an organization can be better equipped if it's as an example, a culture that embraces training and development. They can already be prepared if change needs to occur very quickly. They will know how to take their employees and now train, develop them in a rapid way and to address the change. Goals and achievements, if that is the focus of individuals versus just going about their daily activities, if there's constantly a notion that an organization needs to be looking at new goals, needs to be celebrating and honoring achievements and moving forward, constantly moving forward, that's that continuous improvement culture, then they'll be more equipped to manage change. Conflict resolution, if organization managers and leaders need to, once they develop methods of being able to, in an open, honest, trusting, respectful way, be able to manage conflict, then that too will help with the change efforts, because people will be less resistant to change if there's more effective communication within the organization and problems are handled in a professional manner. Then many of those internal factors associated with resisting change will be addressed. Leaders, if they express passion in the change efforts, if they're persuasive, if they learn how to empower people, all of those factors, including the last one here, being positive and supportive, if people are developed this way, and if they have these characteristics, if the culture embraces these characteristics, then what will occur is people will be less resistant to change because they do not fear discussing ideas, they do not fear each other, they trust each other, and they're more willing to collaborate and work with each other. That, of course, when you hear the word collaboration, working with each other, trust, those things lead to creativity and innovation. Creativity and innovation means change, and means adapting to change, and means perhaps most times for a company to stay in business. Also, as you've probably heard me say several times, communication is a key to eliminating resistance to change within an organization. Leaders need to be authentic, transparent, have good listening skills, and promote dialogue. Let me describe these just a little bit more. So authentic means you could describe that as being real with an individual. In other words, not fake. What you say is what you're thinking. You're not, your behavior is consistent with what you say. You don't do one thing and say another. That's being authentic. Transparent, similarly, transparency means you explain your actions. So being authentic means you say one thing and you do the same thing. Your actions are consistent with what you say. But transparency, very similarly, means that you explain your actions if needed. Therefore, if you are perhaps demanding some forms of change, well, you will then in turn be transparent about those changes, explain why they're needed. Even if it means explaining that your company is going, maybe losing business, they don't have the profit that they once had. It may be difficult for you to tell employees that if you're a high-level manager. But by being transparent, employees will understand. And if it means that they need to change and adapt in order to keep their jobs, well, then they'll be obviously much less resistant to change. And listening to employees, listen to what they say. So many times employees are resistant to change because no one listens to them. They do not ask, they do not have dialogue. Rather, management will tell the employees what is going to be changed, and that's it. What ends up happening is employees become very resistant because they don't have their questions answered. All they want, perhaps, is to be a little bit engaged in the process, be communicated with. That way, some of those fears and anxiety will disappear, and they will be more prone to not resist to change, and perhaps even engage the change efforts. Part of what I've been describing here includes education. So when employees are resistant to change, many times they don't know what's occurring, they don't know the outcomes, they don't know why an organization needs to change and innovate. So if you provide them the knowledge and the training, they will feel more comfortable with the change efforts. You help them understand why change is needed. And then ultimately you develop more people as leaders so that way they do not, well, first off, they will be more willing to accept change as leaders, but then also more able and capable of helping others understand the need for change. Now let's change the direction of our discussion just a little bit, because we've described now reasons for resistance to change. We've described some methods to help reduce that resistance to change. And through our discussion, I've identified many times why leadership is a key factor associated with overcoming problems associated with change. Leadership is very important when it comes to overcoming resistance to change. And to understand leadership, you need to understand the differences between management and leadership. Here's several examples. I can come up with many more, but this I think is a very easy list for most people to understand. If you look at management versus leadership, management is more about rules, promoting rules, making sure the rules are enforced, versus leadership is about training, education. Yes, rules are important, but that's what the managers do. The leaders want to train and educate and develop people. Management's more about the tasks, the everyday tasks. Here's what you have to do, here's who's doing it. Leadership is about goals, goal setting, bigger picture stuff, bigger ideas. Management more of the short term. They're more concerned with what is occurring that hour, that day, week, month, quarter, year, right? More of those short-term time frames, versus leadership is thinking long-term. They are thinking, okay, where is our organization going to be in 5, 10, 50 years? That is leadership versus management. Management is more concerned perhaps with the internal affairs of the organization, the policies, making sure they're followed, the employees, hiring, firing, training. Whereas leadership, they're also concerned with the internal employees, but also those external factors. Remember, we talked about what contributes to change. They are both internal and external factors. Management will be more concerned with the internal challenges, whereas leadership is not only concerned with the internal, but they are also thinking about those external factors associated with how the organization is going to end up, how basically the organization is going to succeed. Management is more concerned arguably about power, because management is a title. They have power with that title, and they're more concerned with using that power to control what employees are doing, so that way the jobs get done. Whereas a leader is arguably, although there are some leaders that will use power, that's a whole conversation, a whole discussion for another day. Although in general, a leader, if they focus more on influence, then they can be a highly effective leader. A leader that focuses more on power, there again, I would argue they are not so much a leader, but more of a manager. A leader that focuses on influence, they will see their influence grow. When power is shared, power decreases for the individual. They are resistant to give that up. Influence, however, when it's shared, it grows. The more influence I have over you and others, my influence grows while your influence grows. That's why influence is considered an extremely important leadership trait. Management is more concerned about control. That has to do with the power, whereas leadership, they are more concerned about inspiration. That has to do with influence. Influence leads to inspiration. Power is associated with control. Management may be more concerned about the budget, whereas leadership's more concerned about forecasting. In other words, thinking ahead, thinking about what assets they currently have, what they may have, and planning for the future. And then finally, management may be looking more at direct reports. In other words, those employees, if I'm a manager, it's those employees that work for me. I'm looking more at them and what they're doing and how to keep my department running. Whereas leadership is more about followers. It's more about people that are willing to go out of their way to do things for that leader. It's about collaboration. All of those key things that are needed to really promote a change effort. What you'll see now as you look at these two lists is that the management, really, they're the ones that apply the change. Everything that I've been describing so far has to do with applying change, the rules, the regulations, the policy, the budgeting, the reporting. All of those things are associated with applying change, not with leading change. Leading change is about the thinking long-term, influence, inspiration. Therefore, and this is very important, therefore, if you have an organization, as I've mentioned earlier, that is heavy on management and does not embrace the leadership that are within the organization, train people to be leaders, identify people to be leaders, develop their skills. If it does not do that, it is lacking leadership. Therefore, it will be extremely difficult without leaders to be able to lead change. Because who is going to perhaps promote the change? Who is going to provide the inspiration for the employees to change? Who's going to teach? Who's going to do all these things? That is why many times organizations turn to someone like myself as a consultant to be able to help them with the change efforts because they are lacking those leadership skills. Therefore, if I help an organization with a change effort, I am not just directly helping them with the change, but focusing more on teaching them to be leaders. Therefore, they can manage their change efforts. If I handle the change efforts, then they're just going to need me over and over and over again. They want to have people like myself that understand this as employees of the organization so they can manage the change as it occurs. What I'm describing for you right now is developing a servant leadership culture. If it's a culture that's, you could call it also a change culture, a culture of continuous improvement. When you have that culture, then change is just simply a part of that everyday process. It is nothing unusual. Servant leaders, the reason why I focus extensively my efforts on training people to be servant leaders is because of the characteristics associated with a servant leader are consistent with organizational development. Without these characteristics, arguably, no matter what the style is of a leader, there's going to be problems. In other words, I'll just give one quick example here, being a listener. That is a direct characteristic associated with being a servant leader. In other words, you're talking less, but listening more. You care about the other before yourself. You're listening. If you have a leader that doesn't listen, that's a problem. They are becoming now, or they are more of the manager, the power-oriented individual that's dictating what to do, less delegating, more dictating, less collaboration. And you can see collaboration, being caring and considerate of others, mentoring people, inspiring them, having vision. All of these are associated with those factors that I mentioned earlier, those factors associated with a leader. A leader thinks long-term. They must provide vision and inspiration. A leader is focused on goal setting and working with others to be able to innovate. Well, that has to do with collaboration and being respectful of others. And again, mentoring people, training them so you have a proper succession plan in place to replace key individuals when they leave, so you don't have, as I mentioned early on, problems associated with losing key employees. Servant leadership, therefore, is associated directly with innovation. Characteristics like trust, being accepting, collaborating, having vision are directly associated with innovation, because without that, people are fearful. Perhaps like in this picture over here, it's kind of maybe a little funny picture, but I like it. This little duck decides to do something different. Well, if that duck is fearful, if they fear that if they do something different, they are going to receive some sort of problems from the rest of those ducks there, then they are going to be much more fearful of doing something different. Now, in some organizations, we want employees doing the same thing. I understand that. If it's quality control and those things, that's more management, right? We're thinking long term. Therefore, we want to have employees that, yes, they're doing what they need to do in a consistent manner for quality, but also when they experience ideas and they're being creative and they find ways of perhaps being innovative, well, they need to be in an environment where they are not fearful to express those ideas and talk about the innovations, and perhaps to some degree be able to try out those innovations to see if they really work. Many organizations, that's very appropriate, but without that culture that embraces change and innovation, without the characteristics associated with a servant leader, then individuals will be less likely to want to change themselves. They'll be less likely to experiment and to innovate and to be creative. What we've been describing up until this point is this continuous improvement culture. This is a culture where change is normal. In other words, every day change may occur. Maybe it's to a small degree, but people are constantly looking for ideas and ways that they can do their jobs better. In order to do their job better means doing something different. Doing something different means changing. Therefore, change is the normal part of what the organization does. These employees embrace change. They do not just do it because they have to, but they respect change. They understand the benefits associated with change. Therefore, because they embrace it, resistance to change is basically eliminated. It is part of that culture. It is what's expected and what's accepted. Meaning, employees know change will occur. They understand change will occur because of internal factors like we addressed, or external factors. So they expect it, but they also accept it. Therefore, when change does occur, something internally or externally, when that does occur, they accept the change. They're not resistant. They accept it. They know it's the normal part of the process of having a successful organization. They embrace it. They make the change and they move on. That is the ideal continuous improvement culture that is able to embrace and manage and deal with change. Finally, let's talk a little bit about a change intervention. Now, I could talk for hours about how a change intervention could be applied. However, we don't have that amount of time, but what I did for you here is just choose 8 different strategies that are associated with change. Excuse me, a change intervention. And to some degree, this is in an order in which these may occur. For example, if there is no sense of urgency within an organization to do change, then no one's going to be excited about it. No one will have any interest in the change. Any change effort will fail before it even starts. For example, if someone in an organization realizes they need to purchase new equipment. It could be something as simple as that. Maybe it's a high cost. Maybe it involves a lot of training. Maybe it involves embracing a brand new technology or software within the organization, all of which could be a significant change effort. Well, if they do not communicate with other top leaders and managers and influential people and the rest of the workforce, that there's some urgency. If we do not change, our competition will do these things. We will lose our business. We will go out of business. They need to have the show in a change intervention. Individuals need to show that there's a sense of urgency. It is important that this gets done. If they cannot show a sense of urgency, maybe the change should not take place. So even to a small degree, there must be some sense of urgency. Once that sense of urgency is displayed to the various individuals within the organization that may have the most impact, then what ends up happening is you will experience this approval of key leaders. In other words, they may not be managers. Keep in mind, anyone can be a leader. Therefore, whether it be top managers, whether it be people that have no title whatsoever, but they have maybe have a lot of experience at the organization, they're very influential, people listen to them. We need approval from those key leaders, because if you do not have their approval, they may be highly influential over others. You'll notice that I keep referring now back to terminology I addressed earlier. I talked about, as an example, that how important it is for a leader to be influential versus the power a manager may have. Because you can have the power as a manager and tell people we got to do this change, but they will be resistant. They may not like the change at all. But if you're a key leader in an organization, if that sense of urgency has now been established with you, if you approve of the change effort, you can be highly influential over other people. Someone who's influential over you, you are now influential over others, and people are less resistant to the change effort and more willing to work with this change intervention and do what needs to be done to make it successful. Specific goals and strategy needs to be created and communicated. These two go together. Oftentimes an organization may understand how they have to change. They may even think they have a strategy and their goal is simply to get the change done, but they do not take enough time to carefully look at the change effort, to consider how others are influenced from one department to a next, or maybe how the customers are versus the internal customers, if you will, the people in the different departments. Careful goal setting, careful strategizing, and effective communication of the change effort can lead to a very effective change intervention. Empowering individuals is also important. This is another key feature of being a servant leader, is you are influencing others, you're empowering others. In other words, you may have mentors that you work with. You may have mentees you work with, people that you are helping. You may have a mentor yourself, but you are all working together. You're collaborating, and as a result, individuals are contributing across the organization to the change effort. It is not just that manager power, tell you what to do and you all have to do it. It is empowering each other and allowing each other to contribute to that change effort. And if you contribute yourself, you are more likely to embrace the change effort. It is also important, as this change intervention occurs, to celebrate when good things occur. The goal may be a year, 5 years away. However, if you celebrate, it may be after a month. The initial change effort began very successfully. Celebrate that. Maybe it's after the first quarter, after the first half a year that the change intervention has been conducted. Celebrate that. Celebrate that milestone, that time frame that went by. It could be that certain individuals within the organization did some really quality work associated with the change. Celebrate them. When you celebrate these short-term gains, what can end up occurring is people will not give up. They maintain their excitement in the change effort. They maintain their willingness to embrace the change. As that occurs, also adapt. If you're having open communication, you're collaborating, you're celebrating the wins, while also look at what could be done better and be willing to change the change effort. Be willing to adapt. And then finally, as this occurs, and then after the one change intervention occurs that we're talking about here, it's just like, it's one effort. There may be multiple efforts going on different things simultaneously, overlapping, whatever it is. During this whole process, the change, that continuous improvement culture, that culture that embraces change, should be embedded as a cultural norm. In other words, the organization becomes one that embraces continuous improvement, embraces leadership development, embraces these various factors that I've addressed, the various characteristics, for instance, of a servant leader. All of those things are embraced, and people are hired and trained and developed by looking at all of these characteristics, and it becomes just a normal part of the organization's daily activities. You have then truly embedded into your culture these norms and embrace change. I really do hope that you learned a lot today about change, organizational development, and how not only how individuals within an organization will perhaps be resistant to change, how you can overcome some of these challenges, and then in turn truly develop a change intervention program that can be highly effective because you take a strategic approach, resulting in not only a successful change intervention, but also a culture that begins and finally ends with firmly embracing change and a continuous improvement culture. Thank you very much. This is Dr. Dan Kohinka, and I do wish you a very happy and blessed day.